hedge and out into the back part of our property, and he's only about 6 foot tall at the shoulder, so he was a good-sized moose, and we've just had a few of those this year, so that's been somewhat exciting. And so this morning we'll be looking at eyes and vision. And this is my office here in Spokane, and I've been here since 1982. Enjoy doing all areas of eye care, from traditional eye exams, but also particularly very interested over the years in vision development, vision therapy. I myself got exposed to it in undergraduate school when I went from reading fine to all of a sudden not comprehending what I was reading and falling asleep, and during my week of doom scoring 8 points out of 50 on an organic chemistry test, which was startling, and that was my introduction that there was more to eyesight than meets the eye. And went through vision therapy myself and have been interested in that ever since, working with head trauma patients and strong interest in nutrition. And my introduction to Bemer came earlier this year. In April, we were working with a head trauma patient. She'd been working for a government agency until, unfortunately, her portable phone headset exploded on her head, completely took out all hearing in one ear, and she basically ended up with a concussive head injury. And so we were doing some vision therapy, some symptomics or light therapy also, and looking at near-point peripheral vision, which gives a kind of a snapshot of the volume of information a person can handle or process through the visual system. And it wasn't going as well as usual. It was pretty slow going until one day she comes in for her third progress visit, and all of a sudden her peripheral vision is a good 50% better. And it was very startling to see the difference after we'd been kind of bogged down for a while. And asked if she'd been doing anything differently, and she said, well, yes, she'd had about 5 Bemer sessions. She also mentioned that her neck and shoulders were feeling noticeably better also from the injury. And so I took note of that. And I've been aware of other PEMF, post-electromagnetic field devices in the past, and in the office for several years I've used microcurrent with macular degeneration. And so took note of Bemer and thought, oh, okay. Well, a couple days later, had an 84-year-old gentleman in who had been experiencing vertigo over the last year or so, and I determined the vision system really wasn't the contributor. I said, thinking 84, circulation, why don't you go down and try this Bemer? And he did, and I heard from Bettina Torres, who's the wonderful person who has introduced Bemer to Spokane a couple years ago as regeneration points. I heard from her that after the patient had his first Bemer session and sat up and shook his head back and forth and thought, huh, the world's not moving as normally it does. And so he left, came back the next week for another Bemer, and she asked him how things had been, and he said, well, it's, so how's it been? And he said, well, it's strange. And she's like, is that a good strange? And he said, well, no, it's a great strange. He said, I've had more energy all week than I've had for quite some time. So it was at that point that I realized I need to investigate more. And after looking at the research and the blood flow and all that Bemer does, it was like, this just makes total sense for the visual system. And so as we go into this, we'll be looking at why I came to those conclusions, and then also some of the results we've been having with some people, and it's been very, very exciting. So from the visual system, as you can see, a third of the population is going to be 60 plus in about 4 years, or 6 years, I guess. And time is marching on. And along with that, often cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration. And fortunately, the treatment for cataracts is just superb these days for surgery, and so that in itself is not a problem. And so that's great. Some new research that just throws a little question mark into things, and so if there is a way that we might be able to hold on to our own equipment longer, or who knows, till our last breath, that would be the best case scenario. Let's begin with cataracts. And so the lens in the eye is where the cataracts take place. The lens is built like an onion. It has layer upon layer upon layer of cells that are spaced perfectly the right distance apart to let the visible light spectrum pass through. And a cataract is basically where some of those layers start to separate or delaminate, throws them out of phase or out of sync. And as you can see on the picture on the right, that's what a kind of cataract looks like, where we just get light hitting the layers and it scatters or bounces. That's why one of the first symptoms of cataracts is often glare at night, because the light's hitting the surface and bouncing. And so that's what a cataract is, and there is no direct blood supply to the lens. There are some vessels that are close. The ciliary muscle, which is around the lens, definitely has circulation to it, but also the aqueous, the fluid inside the eye that's produced and circulates around the lens and then drains out right behind at the junction between the iris and the cornea, the front of the eye, that there's nutrients in the aqueous. And so really in all this last 8 months with Bemer, and it's been so exciting to see macular degeneration and glaucoma improving, but to me it's just been amazing to see how quickly in a number of cases we're seeing changes in the lens in the eye, which is avascular or without blood vessels. And so this was kind of a summary of where we're at to date. Actually, as of yesterday or Wednesday, I guess, so we're now at 36 out of 43. So we're adding more pretty much every week. We're noticing some improvement. And so that has been very exciting. And typically the vast 90+% of people were doing Bemer about 3 times a week. And so in a period of 3 weeks, we reevaluate everybody. And again, sometimes it's just 1 or 2 letters better, but I can see some, and sometimes it's like, well, is there some change taking place? But the patients typically, they're going, well, it seems like I'm seeing a little bit better. And so then we decide if we'd like to do some more, and virtually everybody says yes. And so we do another 10, and at that point, in the vast majority of people, there's been a noticeable improvement. As we'll see with some patients, marked improvement just after 10. And this was one of our first patients that we did, CPA here in town, and came in, and he was reading, he noticed his vision had been blurry, and you'll see on the eye chart on the right, 2050 was the level that he could see through his eye, and his cataract looked actually pretty close to the picture of the example there on the left. And the 2040 line is the one that a person, technically, if a person has a hard time seeing 2040 or better, that qualifies for a surgical cataract removal. And so if he was 2050, his insurance was changing in a couple weeks, or sorry, a couple months, and so we went ahead and scheduled him for surgery, but he was open to trying Bemer, and so I said, I don't know, but let's give it a whirl. And so we had him come in 3 times a week, and he had held the record for the best vision until this next patient, but for this patient before, after the 10 sessions, he went from 2050 to 2025, there line number 7 on the right, missing 1 letter on that, and then 10 more sessions, and he read the 2020 line, and the cataract was totally gone. It looked perfectly clear. We've now seen him at, well, I saw him at a 2-month part post-Bemer. He doesn't have one himself. He's pondering it. But anyway, at the 2-month mark, he was still 20/20 and no cataract. Interestingly, about a month ago, he called me and he let me know they had just had 4 stents put in his heart because it was 85 to 95% blocked. And he's not overweight. He exercises, but still he had major clogging. And so it just is another confirmation that if we're seeing changes in lens clarity, and particularly we're seeing more and more patients even in their 50s showing beginning lens changes, it really is a reflection of their overall health and metabolic efficiency. And further questioning with this patient, he'd been eating for quite a while pretty much pork almost every day of the week, and that is awfully potent fuel for the body. It's like putting jet fuel in your car engine. It'll go like crazy because it digests so quickly, but it's really hard on the equipment. And so I'm guessing that may have been a contributor to some of his other health issues. But anyway, he held the record until 2 weeks ago, and we had a 62-year-old lady in, and she's super nearsighted, and cataract surgery actually would benefit her because she could end up with a much smaller prescription with it put in the lens, but she'd rather wanted to see what could happen. And so she went from the 2100 line to 2050 with 10 sessions. So she's still in the midst of the second 10, and we'll see. Her good eye at the time was 2040, and it went to 2025 in the 10 sessions. So otherwise, the vast majority of patients were in the 2025, 2030 range. So again, catching cataracts before there is a surgical need to intervene. But it's been really exciting to see people get better. 79-year-old, so far I think, is the oldest patient we've done with cataracts. And hers were mild, about 2025, 2030. And after her first 10, she was a few letters better. And she said, I'm not sure if this is in my head or not, but the arthritis in my fingers and arms just feels less. And so she did another 10 sessions. She ended up with 20/20 in one eye, 20/20 minus 3 letters in the other eye. And her comments were, I know it's not in my head now because my knees now feel way better. She was just shaking her head and said, I just have more energy, I'm not feeling depressed, and I just feel better. And so that's just exciting to hear the bonus that comes along with as we're helping them see better. So with the cataracts, the other part that's just very new information was within the last month was in Arizona for a conference, and there was an ophthalmologist from the Phoenix area who is going to be, or maybe already has been, the keynote speaker at the Academy of Ophthalmology, who volunteered his time to come and share with us a concern. Both of his parents have macular degeneration, and so he's looking towards his future, and was just sharing about some of the new research out about the blue light, or the blue end of the light spectrum, and how they're realizing, since it is a higher energy level of light, it does have an effect physiologically. And particularly with the explosion of iPads and smartphones and just our world becoming digital and so many hours being spent looking at devices with blue-white light, there's actually an ongoing science experiment that has just begun that we will see what happens down the road. But there's a pigment that develops in the lens of the eye once we become in our 20s, and that pigment filters out some of the blue light spectrum to help protect the back of the eye. And so right away, thinking of all the youth who are spending many hours, they don't have that filter in there. And so there are now anti-reflective coatings you can put in glasses and different filters that can be done to help protect from that exposure, but it's just like barely in its infancy of getting known. Well, they have UV absorbing properties in lens implants, in the intraocular lenses that can be placed in. However, to date, this is so new, there are no filters in there to bring the upper end of the blue light spectrum filtered out with a lens implant. So anybody that's had a cataract surgery, it's not a bad idea if they're using devices, electronic devices a lot, to make sure they have a pair of glasses with that special tint in them that is being filtered out. And so if we can keep our own lenses which have that pigment built in, all one other reason for keeping what we've got. And so anyway, that's some very, very new information. We'll move on to glaucoma, which glaucoma is a disease, it's the silent thief of vision. The vast majority of glaucoma patients have no idea they have it until it's quite advanced. And what that is we're looking at the optic nerve, so the view on the left there. The very front of the optic nerve, looking on the retina, that would be the round disc on the right side. And that's what we're looking at. It's basically a fiber optic cable gathering about 1 million nerve fibers that gather together and head back into the brain. And traditionally, glaucoma, we think of eye pressure. However, as you can see in the note above, 50% of the glaucoma patients have, quote, normal pressure. So pressure in of itself, while is extremely important and does need to be controlled, the question is that the sole cause of the glaucoma? I think is up for some discussion. But nevertheless, 50% of people don't have high pressure, yet they still have glaucoma or nerve damage. And basically what it is that some of those 1 million nerve fibers, they start to die. And the thought is some of it is the pressure in the eye is pushing on the little tiny capillaries that nourish the nerve as they come into the eye. However, there is also some evidence showing that the glaucoma nerve damage actually starts back in the brain and moves out towards the eye. So that is also up for some discussion. But nevertheless, that's what came to mind when I thought of Bemer, is people with normal tension glaucoma, the pressure is not the problem. And so if Bemer, and it was the question back then, and now with all the research that's done, it's quite evident that Bemer does help in a very profound fashion the microcirculation, and the eye is ripe for benefiting from that improved circulation. It was actually within a month of having the Bemer in office that I realized from just seeing benefits in patients already, head trauma patients, one particular one, the first one, had had a headache for an entire year, 24/7, after her severe head injury she'd had after she was hit while riding her bike with a car wreck, and was in a coma for a month. And after her first Bemer session, the next day she was texting her mom, "Mom, my head doesn't hurt." And then when she came in 2 days later to do her next one, I was talking with her mom, and her mother was just amazed because seeing the difference. She also, the young lady, 23-year-old, had had 0 short-term memory for the last year. And after 2 weeks of Bemer sessions, they got their first glimpse of short-term memory showing up. And she's continued to do it. She's probably done 40 sessions. Again, she's had an occasional headache, but it's at least 95% less than it was for the prior year. and they continue to see slow but steady short-term memory improvement. And again, making note of the big picture, this 23-year-old young lady has her health and her age as her biggest ally, because she smokes at least a pack of cigarettes a day and eats junk food all day long. So in spite of that, because of her young age, the body is still healing. But boy, I'd be curious to know what it could do if she gave it proper fuel along with Bemer. And so because of what I was seeing, I spent about 10 times the amount of what the Bemer Pro costs to get the visually evoked potential there on the left, which is just a very wonderful piece of equipment that measures the electrical signal from the retina to the brain, the VEP part, and then also an electroretinogram, which measures the retinal activity, the response to light itself. And so it's been exciting to see some objective documentation that, yes, things are improving. So the glaucoma, cataracts, the glaucoma, the macular degeneration will continue on. Again, the retina, the back of the eye, has the highest metabolic need of any tissue in the body. It literally is a sea of blood vessels. And the macula, which is the little portion right there, that's the pinpoint of sharpest light. And there are a million light receptors right on that central part. And so over here, we're seeing again the retina. The macula is somewhat hidden in this area. If the mouse returns, there it goes, right about there. All of this white part is called drusen. They're lipid deposits. It's a precursor to macular degeneration, dry macular degeneration. It basically is an accumulation of deposits. So once again, thinking circulation, and with the Bemer working on the venous side as well, helping with the microcirculation improvement, taking the waste products away from tissue. Again, to me it makes total sense with that complete improving the blood flow to the tissue, but then also helping the removal of the fluid and that has the waste products to help get it filtered out of the body rather than just depositing, which can be seen there quite clearly on the right side. The macula, again, it has the highest metabolic need of the retina, so it, in my view, literally is the canary in the coal mine for being able to see changes take place. And that's what's been so exciting, is with some patients just seeing some incredible changes. This gentleman came to me a couple years ago. His medical eye doctor had just said he was sorry, but at the state his eyes were at, and he had normal tension glaucoma, but combined with macular degeneration, there was nothing more that could be done, and that he should just prepare himself to go blind. And just cannot imagine what that's like to hear those words. But he heard about me and came up, and so over the last year and a half or so, we'd been doing some different things and had slowed it down. At one point, had held it and got a little bit better until, and again, just knowing that we had many discussions about sleep habits. I had him have a sleep study done, just thinking it's got to be oxygen related. And unfortunately, they misread his sleep results, and so it took a year before they went back and looked and realized, oh, there is an issue, and so he did get some oxygen, and right away started to see some improvement with that. And then, unfortunately, when his wife died, things took a turn for the worse. Again, just the effect of grief, which is totally understandable, but it does impact things physiologically. He was able to get some counseling and assistance, and with time and prayer, and things moved on. His vision stabilized. It was still slowly decreasing. it was last year, again, a year ago, November, he had heard about PEMF devices and found about a German, one of the Bemer competitors online that sounded like a good thing, and so he purchased one. And so he'd been using it since, I think, a year, this last November, and then, but we just were not seeing any significant change. He was still slowly losing eyesight and continued to worsen. I think it was July when I realized that I should share with him, it was about 2 hours away from Spokane, the research with Bemer, and knowing that he just spent a good amount of money looking at it. But he really looked it over, realized, well, my vision's not getting any better, weighed the value of potential slowing down eyesight loss compared with a bank account, and realized he should go ahead and do what he could do. So he purchased one in August and began using it. And then the sleep program started early November. And a couple weeks ago, on the 25th, I guess that was last week, the progress report, hi Dr. Wylie, in capital letters, just as he said, wow, progress. I have 2 reports that the Bemer overnight program is starting to show eyesight improvement as well as a better sleeping pattern. I'm sleeping more soundly. When I wake, I no longer see black blotches and squiggly spots dancing in my field of vision. Note that this is now true both on the night I used sleep cycle. Oops, sorry. I jumped ahead. Let me back up here. And, sorry. And let's go one more. Okay, now note this is now true both on the night I use the sleep cycle and the night I don't use the cycle. Now beginning to see slight improvement overall vision. I'm thankful to you and to our good Lord for the healing taking place. So what a wonderful early Thanksgiving email that was to receive last Monday about what progress is taking place. And then just within the last week, actually, we've been using the pad, the device with the 3 coils in it, just over his eyes and alongside his head, and he was wondering if he could do it more. And so I said, well, we could try it. I recommended if you want to do the program 1, the early release setting, twice, and he went ahead and he tried the program 2, and his system is so tenuous that the nice part is he has almost immediate feedback. And he tried it and found out this is not helpful. It's too much. He wasn't getting the benefit. So I let him know that he could back off the pad setting from the normal default, which is high, gives 3 times the amount of signal compared to the Bemer body mat that one lays on. You can bring that down to just the lowest setting, so it's equal to the mat that you lay on. And he just sent back an email the first part of this week that that seems to be even better. So it's really a reminder to me that less is more. The body does not need to be hit by a 2x4 to show improvement. And that's what I just appreciate so much about Bemer, is because it is such a low level of electrical activity. They're just using that signal to carry the message to the blood vessels and the cells that help the nitrous oxide and the vasomotion, that it just provides that signal to allow the body to do what it was designed to do. And so, you know, we often want to think if we do more, it'll be better. Well, this patient was a classic reminder of that more is not necessarily better. It can be too much, and that's not a good thing. Another patient we had, this was actually our first macular degeneration patient, but it's just such a wonderful story. I wanted to share it. an 84-year-old with macular degeneration. He was visiting his daughter for 2 weeks here in Spokane. He lives in Baja, fishes whenever he can, so good for him. And 2040 is the minimum you need for an unrestricted driver's license. And 2070, this line over here, was the best he could see in the eye that had the worst macular degeneration. And 2040, number 5, was the best he could see out of his good eye. This was here on July 16th was the first day we saw him in the office. We also made a visually evoked potential measurement to see if we would see any change. With the VEP, 3 milliseconds is the variability within a person. So if they repeat the test, they should be within 3 milliseconds or timing from retina to brain or speed. So anything above 3 is significant. So he began Bemer. We did 1 session a day every day that we were open. And so we got in 8 Bemer sessions. We very strongly encouraged him to drink 2 ounces of water every 30 minutes he was awake. Again, with the huge need for fluid, but again, not too much fluid. The idea is just to provide the body with enough to allow nutrients to flow, oxygen to flow. If a person's chronically dehydrated, that actually can be, in my opinion, a very significant contributor to dry macular degeneration. Because if somebody is chronically dehydrated, there's more electrolytes, more salts, the blood's thicker, it's harder to perfuse into the microcapillaries, the red blood cells get sticky, and it just definitely interferes with transport of oxygen and nutrients. So if a person can just 1 or 2 swallows every 30 minutes they're awake, it won't increase need to go to the bathroom. It's really anything more than 8 ounces in 1 hour, which tends to go right through us. So we encouraged him to do that. We also started him that day on Macula Complete, which for what I see right now, it's one of the best nutrient supplements for macular degeneration. Biosintrex, you can look that up online, biosintrex.com. So we did the 8 sessions, had him drink the water, started the Macula Complete, and the results, 2 lines of improvement in each eye, 8 Bemer sessions, 10 days later in an 84-year-old. He was very pleased. And his VEP in his good eye sped up by 9 milliseconds, in his worst eye by just under 6 milliseconds. So again, 3 is within the normal measurement, so again, very significant and measurable improvement. Well, needless to say, because of that success, was very happy, and because of that, his daughter bought her dad a Bemer. And so he took it with him and ended up going up to British Columbia for about a month and a half to spend time with his son. And the story continued on because a couple months later he was ready to start the sleep program, and I emailed him just asking how things were going. And I'm just going to read from his email. It said, "I have been sleeping most nights for 8 hours, first time in about 35 years, next. Sleep mode may help on the nights that have not been restful. I have the macro charts, which what he means is the Emsler grid. And it's just a chart that people look at. If they have macular degeneration, it's going to show distortion or holes in the pattern there. And so it says, I have the macro chart to look at, and the lines are now all okay on the left eye. That was his good eye. The right eye was the major concern. The lower left 1/4 was a real mess. Now that area is almost okay, with only a few other areas with small crooked lines. I'm very pleased. And then he went on to describe that he spent a whole day doing some major outdoor exertion, very heavy activity, and he was hurting bad by the time he got done, and he wasn't looking forward to the days of being stove up in his term. He got on the Bemer, and pain was gone, and no problems the next day. So I sent his daughter the email, just very pleased to hear about his visual system, and she did email back and mention to me, Dad didn't mention to you that his arthritis is so bad that he had to lean on a grocery cart to walk through the store and was using a wheelchair when in an airport. After a month of Bemer treatments, he was taking the resident Gordon setters for long walks every day at my brother's house. The Bemer has produced amazing results. Here we go. Long walks every day at brother's house. And the Bemer's produced amazing results far beyond what I'd hoped for. I would have been quite happy if all it had done was stop the macular degeneration. And so, needless to say, she is very pleased. And we just saw her this week, actually, and she just said her dad's now back in Baja, and he has two friends, patients, or friends of his that have macular degeneration, and they've been coming over and starting to use his Bemer, and so he's got a little, assistance to others going on down there and enjoying the company of the people. And so she now is, the daughter's actually has a very tiny beginning cataract, and so she's in the process of getting Bemer for herself and her husband, who has a lot of arthritis issues. And again, just what a priceless gift she was able to give her dad, not only his eyesight, as well as quality of life. And it's been just a treat to hear other patients noticing things getting better. And so I just want to thank you very much for this time, and now I'd be happy to open it up for questions. And again, if they can be typed in, and I think Oliver will help me out if I can't see it on my screen. I know I did have one question that was sent last night in case it didn't come through. There was a question about Bemer application and wet macular degeneration. So that is an area we've been looking at, and that is one area that I can say I have not seen Bemer as of yet be helpful for the wet macular degeneration. And so right now what we're doing with patients is recommending that they're doing Bemer, continue whole body part, maybe work with liver. We're trying some things, because the wet macular, it's not necessarily leaking blood, it's leaking fluid, interstitial fluid. And again, what's the underlying cause that's causing the leakage? So we do, well, vitamin C is a glue that holds cell membranes together. So we've been doing tests with some patients with some very good quality vitamin C. Right now we're trying Dr. Gary Gordon's formulation called Bioenergy C, which has some other good things in it, and seeing if that may be helpful to try and seal up some of the leaks. We're just too preliminary into that evaluation, so I would not recommend the Bemer extra emphasis right now working on the wet macula, but working on the whole body for now I think is a prudent way to approach that. And so we'll continue to look at that area. And go ahead, Oliver.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so very much, Dr. Wylie. I can see that in the meantime we have quite a number of questions rolling up here. Let's just jump into it. So what I see here is this, for example. When you are done with the initial treatment phase, what program do you use for maintenance? I'm speaking of a program for cataract in this question. Thank you.
Sure. Well, with what we've just been doing in the office, people are on the body mats, and starting usually, since they're 3 times a week, most people intensity 3, and at the same time we're doing the Bemer pad with the 3 coils in it, paper towel over their face and forehead, and then just lay the mat with the center coil kind of centered over the bridge of their nose, so it kind of goes over their head and just along each side of the head. And we just keep that at program 1. And again, it's been working, so I don't, there's a need to vary that. And then just every week we vary the intensity of the body mats, just by 1 intensity up to number 6. And then if they're continuing on back down to, we usually go to level 4, 3 or 4, and then again just weekly keep the body part changing, but we really haven't been changing the mat parts, or the pad, I'm sorry, over the eyes at program 1, since it goes through its variation on its own. I think that's helpful.
All right, good. Thank you very much. Let's see, next one here. I suddenly have an aggravation with floaters in my left eye, and it's making my vision a little blurred when reading. Can the Bemer help for floaters?
Again, I haven't had enough patients to see yet. Definitely you want to get in to see your eye doctor to make sure nothing came loose, as in the retina related, particularly if there were flashing lights or anything associated with that. Again, I don't know. That would bring me back to the vitamin C part, wondering. I could see where it could be helpful, because again, since coming from the lens viewpoint where it is avascular, and the vitreous certainly has no blood flow in it, but it does carry nutrients. And we're literally born with hundreds of floaters. They're leftover construction parts from as the eye is being developed, but they are just like fruit in a jello mold. They're suspended, and as long as the floaters don't move, they are completely invisible. They did studies years ago where they took some really small cotton mirrors and attached them to some contact lenses, put them on a person's eye, and it would neutralize all micro eye movement. And within 3 seconds, the person was quote-unquote blind. Vision just stopped. And so even when we stare at something, our eye is making micro eye movements, and that keeps the refresh rate, keeps the eye seeing. And so floaters occurrence, which occurs, again, as we mature, we get more floaters. To me, that means the vitreous is getting more liquefied. Why is that happening if it's not, again, another sign of metabolic inefficiency showing up? So, again, trying to increase vitamin C for now would be one thing to do, because there is some extra C in the vitreous. So, Bemer, I would think, is definitely worth a try on the floaters and see. I just haven't seen it as of yet.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Let's see, another one. If you already had eye surgery, I've been implanted with lenses, will it do any good or harm to use the Bemer on the eyes?
Oh, definitely do no harm at all. That's the nice part about Bemer. And so, again, you will just be increasing circulation to the retina, which has the highest metabolic need of any part of your body. So, and the eyes are literally brain tissue. So, the Bemer can only be helpful.
Okay. Then there's 2 questions that are kind of similar to each other, so we can probably give one answer to both of these questions. And that is, when you're referring to a Bemer session, are you referring to B-Buddy or something specific, a specific application to the head or the eye? And the next question is, how to use the Bemer for the eyes?
Okay. So yeah, just a session is our 8 minutes with the traditional, the intensity program that lasts for 8 minutes. And so they're doing the body at whatever intensity levels that I talked about just a moment ago, and at the same time using the Bemer pad over their eyes, program 1. And that's the program.
Okay. Here's a question. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Wylie. A client of mine has asked me this question, a question about eyes. The material of the replacement is not human tissue. I hesitate to use Bemer on my eyes. What if it heats up and destroys my retinas? Not much fun. Can you advise, please?
Well, we do know that, yes, the Bemer cannot heat up anything. Again, the microtesla are lower, it's lower than the magnetic field of the Earth. So unless the person's feet are catching on fire by walking around on the Earth, assuming they're not on a volcano, yeah, there's no heating that takes place with Bemer whatsoever. And part about, it wasn't quite, the part about mentioned about the tissue was not part of the body. If you can repeat that part of the question.
No, it was just, excuse me, it only said that the material was not human material for that reason that we're...
Okay. If we're talking about the lens implant, it's like a plastic material, which again, plastic's melting point's at several hundred degrees, so the body would have melted way before the lens implant.
Yeah. Well, you probably couldn't even sit in a sauna, I guess.
No.
All right. Let's see. Here's another one. I have very early signs of glaucoma, and I would like to know how to use the Bemer now.
That's pretty much what the same program we've been talking about is doing the body and then over the eyes. The liver ties in with the eyes function from a Chinese medicine point of view. So any liver support, and again, looking at overall health, again, Bemer helps microcirculation wonderfully. But again, that's a big part of it, but you need to also address the other areas of nutrition. It's hugely important. So, but I would just, we do the same thing with the glaucoma patients that we do with cataract patients, just the pad over the eyes and the Bemer body mats. But yeah, any extra things you can do for your liver can help your eyes as well.
Yeah, so I think on a general note, we can say it is always good to have a full body application in addition to any local application. That's not only true for any eye treatments, but for any local applications.
Yes.
All right, then here, this is more of a testimony. Here's somebody saying, I have scarring from an inflamed optic nerve that has caused me to be legally blind in one eye. My eyesight has improved dramatically over the last few months of using the Bemer. That's a beautiful testimony right there.
Great.
Yep. Let's see, what else do we have? Just a two-word question. Corneal erosions?
Possible, yes. Again, the cornea, you turn over a whole cornea every 7 to 10 days as far as the front layer. So it's one of the highest, again, metabolically active areas. And so I haven't worked specifically with that. However, one patient that we're doing cataracts with is just severe dry eyes, and she actually had 4 bubbles like on her lower cornea where it was just like, it looked like a bubbling of the cornea. And after 10 Bemer sessions was looking at her cornea and thought, now wait a minute, went back and looked at my chart and she was down to 3 bubbles, and another 10 Bemer sessions and she was down to 2.5 bubbles. And so and at that point, her cataracts were mostly gone, and so I haven't seen her since then. But yeah, we were seeing some corneal changes, at least with that patient. So definitely can only be helpful.
Okay. Here I see basically an answer to the other question that we had before about the floaters, and here's someone saying, Bemer took my floaters away over about a year. So there's somebody who has experience with this, and apparently the Bemer improved that condition. All right, then let me see here. A question. Small sparkling white light when eyes are closed. Are those small floaters?
No, that would be more kind of electrical activity in the brain. If it's just there temporarily, like you first go to sleep, close your eyes, you turn off the lights. Part of it could also be somewhat if they go away after several seconds. That would be kind of the refresh rate of the retina, just settling in. If they persist, or if they're there when a person wakes up in the middle of the night, to me that indicates likely deficient blood flow. So it's similar to the first patient we had on the slide with the glaucoma and the macular degeneration. When he would wake up at night, he would see these sparkly things as well as the black blotches. And since doing the Bemer sleep program, that has resolved. So yeah, I would take that as a caution that if they're persistent through the night, that there is probably a circulation issue going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we have another one. That person says, I have retinal occlusion in my right eye. Could the Bemer therapy help here?
Something like a branched vein occlusion or something like that. It's hard. I mean, in a perfect world, if a person had Bemer immediately upon, if you had that within the first few days of having the occlusion, ideally the first day, I think Bemer would be hugely helpful. But tissue does repair, and so it's likely not going to make a back to normal in any stretch of the means recovery, but twofold, it can't hurt. We use syntonics or light therapy in the office, and things people can do at home. And we've seen people with occlusions that have happened several years in the past, and with light therapy make some improvements. And so Bemer just is another application of physics to the body, just like light is an application of physics to the body or color. And so Bemer would definitely be helpful. The biggest point I would think that I would say for a reason to do Bemer is maybe, if it helps the eye that was injured, wonderful. But the biggest thing would be, I would think the Bemer would be extremely helpful in increasing the odds of that same thing not happening to the good eye. Because the occlusion, again, happened for some reason. Things were sticky, not flowing, and clogged up. So, and we know Bemer that's what it does, is help the flow of blood. So I would look at it as a extremely wise investment to do for helping prevent further occurrence of it.
Okay, thank you. I see that a few listeners, a number of listeners are actually asking about the applicators that have been used on the eyes. So one question is, what about using the B light over the eyes? Is this okay?
Again, definitely don't do it with your eyes open. But with eyes closed, again, if it's somebody that is in good health and everything, I've done it with some people and just tell them if it seems bothersome, don't do it, or put a piece of gauze or something right over the eyelid, or hold a finger over just to cover up, add a little extra protection. LEDs themselves through a closed eyelid are not going to hurt a single thing on the eye or the retina. I would not recommend doing it with eyes open, though. It's just too bright. We use much lower levels of light if we're looking into the eye.
Right. So these LEDs, they emit I think it's a 660 nanometer LED light, and if you open your Bemer box, you will see that there is a pair of goggles delivered also. So these are goggles that you can put on. However, and this is what, of course, the medical research department and research and development in Liechtenstein had tested as well. That light is not causing any damage. However, there's, of course, people that may be very, very sensitive and they feel discomfort with it. Another issue might as well have been for example, with individuals who have epilepsy, that could trigger seizures, possibly. So for that reason alone, we would generally say it's probably not recommended to look straight right into this light, but the light itself does not cause any immediate damage to the eye. All right, then with regard to the B spot, Dr. Wylie, have you used the B spot directly on the eye?
Some patients, a couple of head trauma patients, just like it better than the B pad. Again, you just have to kind of move it around, but yeah, it can be used just as well. Just since it's not covering as large an area, you just need to kind of move it more. But yeah, I would think it would work just as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then there is a listener. That listener says, I had cataract surgery about 5 years ago with very poor results. This year I had LASIK surgery on that same eye twice and still only have 20/45 vision. Any chance that the Bemer could help?
Well, there's always a chance. Yeah, I'm not sure what all is going on there because the LASIK would be on the front of the eye, the cornea, and then the lens implants more in the middle of the eye. Again, it can help circulation, and since you don't have to worry about a cataract anymore, it won't be working on that part. But if it's front of the eye involved, and if poured oxygen or nutrients is involved with interfering with sight or clarity, both at the corneal level, the front of the eye, or at the retinal level, then Bemer could very well help with that. So just have to try it and see.
Okay, yeah, always a good advice. So we're reaching the hour. I think we should wrap it up slowly. Maybe one more question. Here is a listener who is concerned about his or her diabetic state. She says, or he says, does the Bemer help with a person that has diabetes and is going blind?
Well, seeing the different studies with Bemer and the diabetic patients, yes, Bemer can be, I think, incredibly helpful for the diabetics. Just knowing what it does for blood flow and what they talk about with the diabetic, they only get one vasomotion pumping in 10 minutes, and it should be ideally 30 to 50 in 10 minutes. And since the Bemer specifically gets that vasomotion activated, I think in a perfect world, every diabetic would have exposure to Bemer treatment, because I think it's one of the best things that I could imagine for the diabetic to help with the circulation while they're also working on a nutritional program to help their body get the nutrients to help fix and repair things.
Yeah, and I think we can also imagine that, as you stated initially, as you explained, the retina is the area with the highest metabolic needs and activity, correct? So if we just increase the blood flow in these tiny blood vessels that we have in the retina, then we can understand that any improvement of the blood flow there might most likely be very, very helpful. And when we know that diabetic patients oftentimes have exactly that problem of sometimes severely reduced blood perfusion, then we can just connect the dots and come to the conclusion that there's a very, very good chance that in this case or with this patient, the Bemer might be very, very, very helpful.
And there's just one other thing I'll just tie in, because one of the worst parts with the diabetic retinopathy is when it gets to the proliferative stage where the body is growing new blood vessels. Because, again, the retina, it's because of the poor metabolic process with the diabetes, the retina literally starts starving of oxygen and nutrients. It sends the signal to the brain, help, I'm starving, grow me new blood vessels. Well, the patient grows new retinal blood vessels, but because of their poor health, the quality of the blood vessels being built are not good, and so they very easily leak. That causes the bleeding inside the eye. The blood coagulates, and that pulls the retina off and detaches the retina, and that's what causes the blindness with the diabetic patients due to the proliferative stage of the diabetes. Well, and so treatment for that is often the laser treatment, where they just zap with the laser hundreds to sometimes even 1,000 little holes in the retina, and so it's just target practice. And really, literally, the purpose is, the goal is to destroy enough of the retina so that the oxygen need to nourish the retina decreases enough to the level at which the person's compromised metabolic health can handle. So it's literally, you are chopping the animal caught in a trap, you're sacrificing the limb just to get away, to survive, and so you kill 50% of the retina to try and match the metabolic need of the inefficient process. How much better to try and increase the circulation, to increase the metabolism, so that the retina can now start working again and decrease the need for the body to try and grow lousy blood vessels.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of the opposite way to approach this problem, right? Instead of cutting down on the need, just augmenting the supply, and that's a good solution. All right. Well, Dr. Wylie, thank you so very much. I think we have seen quite some compelling examples here also, and thank you so very much for sharing your expertise with all of us here. I'm sure that you know, when we think about what Bemer does on the eye and what Bemer does in so many other conditions and many other areas, we can really see the benefit of that technology. So
very, very exciting. And so thank you everyone for attending. I appreciate that very much. And it's just fun to watch things get better.
yeah, absolutely. Well, so thank you very much. Stay tuned. We will have many more webinars of the sort, and I'm sure we will hear from Dr. Wylie a lot more as more discoveries and more findings are being made. That's very, very exciting news. Thank you.